The cabin of Flight 672 exhaled quiet luxury. Smooth leather seats gleamed under soft LED lighting. Champagne flutes clinked gently, and passengers leafed through financial papers or scrolled aimlessly on their phones. In first class, everything was hushed, designed to soothe, to reassure, to promise that everyone seated there belonged. Everyone, that is, except the boy in the dark hoodie. 15-year-old Caleb Bryant stepped into the cabin with careful, quiet confidence. His black hoodie was pulled slightly over his neatly shaped hair, and his spotless white sneakers tapped softly against the aisle carpeting. He held a worn copy of Things Fall Apart in one hand and a first-class ticket in the other. The boarding pass wasn't a favor or a hand-me-down from an adult. It had his name on it, bought full price. Caleb had no intention of standing out. He was used to flying, used to walking through places where people looked at him twice, or 3 times. His father had taught him early, walking like you're meant to be there because you are. He approached seat 2A, the window seat, his favorite. It was the quietest place on the plane, the one where he could think, read, and look out at the endless sky without interruption. He placed his small backpack in the overhead bin, sat down slowly, and opened his book. But someone had noticed. Sandra Kellerman, head flight attendant for over 15 years, walked through the cabin with mechanical grace. She adjusted her name tag, smoothed her uniform, and offered polite, practiced smiles to each first-class passenger until her gaze locked onto Caleb. She stopped. Her eyes flicked over him. Hoodie, headphones, alone. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" she asked, her voice smooth but edged with ice. Caleb looked up, caught the stiffness in her posture, the judgment already written in her face. He said nothing, just reached into his hoodie and handed her his boarding pass. She snatched it, reading it out loud, almost theatrically, first class. "Seat 2A. "Yes, ma'am," Caleb said quietly. Sandra looked him over again, then leaned down. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am." She pursed her lips. "You need to move to the back. This seat isn't yours." "But it is," he said. Sandra didn't wait. She reached down, slapped his hand off the armrest as he reached for his phone. The sound cracked like lightning through the otherwise silent cabin. No one said a word. No one protested. Not the man in the gray suit who had watched the exchange from across the aisle. Not the woman with her designer handbag, who glanced up and then quickly looked away. Caleb stood. No tears. No anger. He simply picked up his bag and walked, slow and silent, to the back of the plane. Row by row, shame burning in his palms. He sat down in the last row, next to the bathroom. The air smelled of cleaning chemicals and cold metal. His knees nearly touched the seat in front of him. He looked out the tiny window, then typed one sentence on his phone. "She slapped me and moved me to the back. Sitting last row," and hit send. Hundreds of miles away, Malcolm Bryant was in the corner office of Stratton Airtech, the company that controlled a controlling interest in the airline. He looked down at the message on his phone. He didn't swear. He didn't yell. He just made one call. Inside the cockpit, a message from operations blinked urgently on the screen. "Hold flight 672. Do not close cabin doors. Do not proceed with taxiing." Captain Howard Stevens blinked. In 30 years of flying, he had never received a hold order from that level of corporate command. He picked up the intercom. "Sandra, please report to the cockpit." Sandra adjusted her collar and marched forward. In the cockpit, she found not just the captain, but a live video call waiting. The face on the screen was Alicia Romero, Chief Operating Officer for Stratton Airtech, flanked by legal counsel. "MS. Kellerman," Romero began, her voice sharp and calm. "Do you know who you moved from seat 2A? Sandra blinked. He wasn't. That was Caleb Bryant, the son of Malcolm Bryant. The silence in the cockpit deepened. Sandra's face drained of color. I didn't know," she whispered. "No, you didn't. And that's the problem," Romero replied. "You didn't know, but you acted like you did. You assumed." Sandra's mouth opened. "Closed." Romero continued. "You are instructed to apologize to Caleb Bryant in front of every passenger and return him to seat 2A immediately. Or you will be removed from the aircraft and your employment will be reviewed for termination." Sandra stood frozen. Captain Stevens finally spoke, his voice low and ironclad. "You heard the directive. Make it right, or this plane won't move." With her shoulders hunched and her steps heavier than ever before, Sandra walked the length of the plane again. This time, not with the authority of a head flight attendant. This time, with something breaking inside her. She reached the last row. Caleb was still staring out the window. "Caleb," she said, barely audible. "I need to apologize." He didn't look at her. A few passengers turned their heads. "I was wrong. I judged without checking. I'm sorry." Still, Caleb didn't speak. "You didn't check anyone else's ticket," he said finally, softly. "Just mine." Her face fell. "You looked at me and decided I didn't belong." He stood. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. But as he walked the aisle, heading back to seat 2, every passenger watched. This time not with judgment, but with recognition. When he sat, his book back in hand, Sandra stood by awkwardly. She had nothing left to say. In the airline's operations center, emergency meetings had already begun. The video of Sandra slapping Caleb's hand had surfaced online, posted by a college student in row 21. The hashtag #Seat2 had gone viral within the hour. News outlets were calling. Human rights organizations were reaching out. Caleb's image, quiet, seated, dignified, was now at the center of a national conversation. In seat 2A, Caleb still hadn't opened his book. He was listening to the silence of passengers who had failed to speak earlier, listening to the ripple his quiet resistance had caused, and listening to a new silence, one not of compliance, but of awakening. At the gate, security was waiting for Sandra. She was removed before the flight took off. No uniform, no farewell, just a file stamped with suspension. Later that week, the airline announced mandatory anti-discrimination retraining across all staff. Malcolm Bryant issued a statement not about his son, but about every young person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. And Caleb? He gave one interview. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I need people to understand. And I need people to stop waiting until they find out who someone's father is before they start caring." The interviewer asked him what he hoped for next. He said simply that the next kid who sits in seat 2, it doesn't have to earn it twice. And with that, the story of Flight 672 was no longer about a slap. It was about silence. And who finally broke it?